Hi, I'm Sherri.
I'm Lana.
And this is Real Estate Tips with SNL. Lana, who do we have here today?
I'm so excited. Today we have Lieutenant John Girouard from the Fitchburg Fire Dept. Yay!
That's me.
That's you. So, John, a couple things we want to start off with some basic background. So, how long you've been in the fire department? Where did you start? Where are you right now? Just a little recap of everything right now.
Oh, boy.
And where did you come from?
That's a loaded question. So it actually, it's kind of like a zigzag of my career path.
Nice.
So when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to be a firefighter. And then at the time, I was actually an intern at the Ashburnham Fire Department. So I worked as an EMT for about a year when I finally turned 18. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a firefighter so bad. So bad. And I have a lot of family history that runs in the military. So I think a part of me already had a little bit of that in my blood. And I joined the military. I was a combat medic in the infantry for several years.
Wow.
I went to Afghanistan. Sadly, I got wounded in 2011. I got a Purple Heart.
Yep. That's
I
awesome.
got out on January 28th, 2013. And then I started on the Fitchburg Fire Department in July of 2013.
Wow.
And I've been there since full time.
Nice.
That's amazing. So what is a typical day like in the life of Lieutenant John?
Yeah. So it's pretty orchestrated. It's almost like orchestrated chaos, if you will, because we do have our daily checks. Like every morning, every piece of apparatus that's active for the day, 3 engines, a ladder, a rescue, a deputy's vehicle, fire alarm. We all go through radio tests. We check all the equipment on the apparatus. That happens first. That's the first thing that happens every day. And then usually after that, we talk to, myself as a lieutenant, I talk to the captain who's running through downtown, talk about what do we have for training for the day. So generally we'll have upwards of 90 minutes to 2 hours of training in the morning. And then we'll do business and industrial commercial inspections in the afternoon, or vice versa. Sometimes we do training. Sometimes we do inspections.
Mm-hmm. And when you say inspections, you're talking about commercial buildings within Fitchburg,
Correct.
Like what? Restaurants, like the college?
It can be restaurants. It can be a hardware store. It could be a mill building. Anything that pretty much owns an occupancy license for some sort of business purpose.
Mm-hmm. Are these scheduled in advance, or are these unknown?
So there's two little answers to that, and I could get into the Mass General Law side of it, but without stating the Mass General Law itself, we can conduct business and industrial commercial inspections within reasonable hours of their operation. So if, say, your business is 8 to 4 and I show up at 9:30 and I say, hey, I'd like to do your annual business inspection. Mm-hmm. Rightfully so, a business can say, hey, it's a terrible time.
Right, it's our rush hour
We just
or whatever.
epoxied the floors.
Right.
Again, we're still people. And this may surprise some, but some firefighters own businesses or their families or their wives or children, you know what I mean? So we're people.
Yep.
We just happen to be the ones conducting the inspection that day. So there's no wrongdoing in being we'll come back another day. But on the other flip side of that coin, if someone's being rude or ungrateful about our service, we can kind of push the envelope and say, hey, there's a Mass General Law in order that says I can do this within the operating hours of your business, which you hold an occupancy permit for through the city of Fitchburg. But
the golden rule.
But we never want to cross that line because we still want people to rely on us, and we rely on people because we want businesses and people to stay within the city limits and work safely and effectively.
And they have good relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is this similar to when there's a multifamily of 4 units and higher? Is this an inspection that the fire department does, or is this a city inspection? I know for them to transfer property, they need to get an inspection done. Is that something you're doing as far as a firefighter, or is that?
No.
Okay, so that's a different.
When it comes to multifamily homes or even single family homes within the city, we refer that back to our fire prevention and I think it's like the fire prevention and actually, no, I think that's it.
Just
The
fire-
Fire Prevention Bureau is what we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a captain and a firefighter that work there Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And I know many people see them around the city and they run into them, and they're two of the most outstanding individuals I've ever worked with.
Nice.
One of them I worked with, he was my lieutenant at Oak Hill when I first went up there maybe 5 years ago or so. And then the other one, the firefighter, was on my group at headquarters when I first started. So he helped kind of mold me back into like the Fitchburg firefighter life. So they're both, I can't say enough about them. They're
Nice.
outstanding people, and they're so level-headed with people's needs and people's wants, because they have to meet mutually.
Right.
Because sometimes what people need is this inspection to pass.
Right.
Yes.
And it doesn't always.
Right.
But what people want is for it to go over smoothly, and the fire department wants to make sure that both of those things happen, because I've been in the rolling chair at the law office when I'm trying to sell a house, and I don't want my paperwork to be,
Right.
you know, you want your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and they will work with anybody, and you know, I want to be just like them someday. So.
I would say we're probably more familiar with fire prevention because of our work with helping sellers get ready for closing on a home, and we will refer to that as a smoke inspection, but it's your smoke detectors, your carbon monoxide detectors, and that certificate is good for 60 days. I know a lot of people tend to wait till the last minute, which isn't the best thing to do, because people do have schedules and may not be able to get over there right away, and it may not pass the first time. I think it can be complicated for people when they're seeing the rules on it. And I know this is not your area of expertise, but I wanted to touch briefly on the fact that where you do work for the city of Fitchburg, Fitchburg is one city that I know of locally. I don't know of any others that actually require that smoke detectors have to be hardwired. And it's my understanding that basically was an opportunity for the city to get everything up to code during real estate transfer transactions. Because there's been a serious problem. And that's where I'm going to talk to you, because that's more your area of expertise.
Sure.
With wiring and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I'd love to talk about it. And I had mentioned that I'm very grateful that I was able to get my education through the GI Bill while I was still a firefighter. So I got my undergrad in fire administration with a concentration in fire prevention and suppression systems. So I learned a lot, and I love it, but it doesn't make me I want to say, like, I'm not like the go-to fire prevention guy, but I understand the laws and regulations and how they work. When it comes to multifamilies, right, you have to think in regards to the fire detection system has to work in regards to everybody's safety. So yes, the hardwire thing is extremely important, because if there were, say, a fire on the first floor and someone is sleeping soundly on the second floor and soundly on the third floor, if, say, they weren't hardwired and the person's battery was dead or took their smoke detector down and a fire happened, it could go on for several minutes or, before someone noticed the smoke. Or the flames. And then the person on the second or third floor called and they say, oh my God, like, I can smell smoke. There's a fire somewhere. And, we've been, and respectfully so, I've been in these situations before. And it's extremely stressful for the firefighters to go to a building that is, has a fire inside of it, and the smoke detectors aren't going off. And it makes you think, like, why? And then you go through the situations where they're either non-existent, they're taken down, they're covered up, something like that. So I can totally understand why that they're moving towards the hardwired side of things. I will say with respects that, the city of Fitchburg still has to recognize the, they call it like the grandfathered in codes.
Right.
If a home was built in, 1900 or late 1800s, and it's historical, and the same family owns it over and over and over again. If they're not selling or transferring the home to a new ownership, I don't believe that they're having inspections done. So some homes, with respect to being, historic and staying in the family and so on and so forth, they may still have just simple battery operated smoke detectors. But as long as those detectors are getting replaced, the batteries are getting checked,
they may still work.
They may still work just fine. And but when it comes to multifamily homes and new construction, we do abide by a code, and we, as firefighters, we enforce the new code to never be less than the old. So for instance, I'll try not to get too far off the beaten path with this. Say you own a home and you're like, I want to build an addition. I want to build a library off the side of my house, and it's going to be the most beautiful library ever. You go to the city for a building permit, and you have to get, the city has to say yes, the electrical inspector has to say yes, all that stuff, right? Well, you're changing the natural footprint of the home. So your home is now changed. The square footage has changed, everything. You now have to change to the new code of fire prevention. And if you had just battery operated, sometimes the people call them like plug and play. You have to abide by the new code of the NFPA 1 fire standard. Your entire home now has to be interconnected. Wire in smoke detectors.
And it's interesting too. It's not just interconnected, so to speak. There are specific types that they have to buy. And I know that if you go to like a local big shop store, you can't
unnamed store,
you cannot get those there. So I speak to my clients about calling the fire prevention directly, because they are your resource. They will tell you exactly what you need, what type of stuff to get. And then I say, then we need to schedule with them to come in and check it out. Now, I have been through some inspections where they show up and I'm begging, please let it pass, right? And it doesn't, right? So it's just a matter of them. They will actually come in and they will talk to everyone. They want you to get the right stuff.
It's really, education.
It is.
Absolutely.
So I think people are afraid, like, well, I'm not going to call the fire prevention because I'm just going to go to the store and go get it. Well, I always say, don't go to the big name store because you're not going to get the right stuff. But they are there, right? They're there to answer questions. I mean, a consumer can call up and just say, can you tell me what I need?
Absolutely. Right. And again, I can't say enough. They are the greatest gentlemen up there. And you don't want to, go get one detector and spend however much money and be like, oh my God, I was actually supposed to get something called a photoelectric. And, you're right, there are several different types of detectors, and there's some that have just smoke, some that are mixed use of smoke and carbon monoxide.
Some with battery, the battery backup.
They have to talk to each other, so get the same brand. So you said something earlier that I thought was incredibly powerful, and that was, showing up to an active fire and there's no smoke detectors going off. I would say that it's not uncommon for me to go on a listing appointment where I'm, seeing a house for the first time, and I walk in the door and I can see where a smoke detector once sat, but it's no longer there, or you see it open and the battery's been pulled out because it was chirping and no one wanted to deal with it. And I think it's so, it's such an easy fix. But people think at the moment, because it's always going to happen at the most inopportune time. You're trying to sleep and you hear the thing chirping, so you rip the thing off the wall, and then you never go back to it.
Right.
And so how often do you, maybe you can't put a number on that, but is it pretty common to go to a house and not hear smoke detectors?
I don't want to say it's more common than not. I'm more of an optimistic person than a pessimistic person at almost all times. But I'm human, I'm as human as everybody else. And I know how frustrating it can be if a smoke detector is chirping in the middle of the night, and how easy it can be to just take it down. But that's not the right answer. And that's what you have to result back to. And as human as I am, I have to project my my empathy for people who say they can't reach them. And it's driving them crazy, or they can't afford new ones. And it's real. Like, life is real.
Yeah.
Everybody's circumstance is different, and everybody has their own war story. And I completely respect that. But I'm also a little bit of a tough person to get across when you try to tell me that.
I didn't get to it.
If they don't have the right answer. And we do go to a lot of calls where I'll hear the chirping going off. Like, say if it's a medical emergency, and I'll hear the chirp, and I'll be like, John, do you say something? And then, like the good John on my right side of my, shoulder says, yes, you say something. I look over on the other side, and a little bad John says, nah, don't worry about it. That's not why we're here. I always revert back to good John. And I always say very respectfully, like, hey, I know this isn't why we're here, but you have a low battery in your smoke detector. Or sometimes I'll make like an off-topic comment and be like, oh, hey, I didn't know if you knew this, but you're actually missing a smoke detector in the hallway. And they look at me with like this odd face, and I'm like, I had to say something.
Yeah. So what do you, I feel like sometimes the consumers are afraid to call the fire prevention or the fire department in general because it's not an emergency, there's nothing going on. Is there a place that people can call and maybe get some free stuff? Maybe there's a certain age group, maybe the seniors can get it, or is there some place that people can call just to get info, or maybe they know of something that's given to them?
Oh, absolutely. So I believe that there is a seniors assistance program. I can't remember the age. It could be 65, 75, something like that. Where if they're in need of a new detector, they're in need of help replacing it.
Okay. Say
their family doesn't live locally, or they don't have family close by, or whatever the case may be, we will assist them in doing so.
Nice.
And so those programs do exist. And I do also believe that there may be a program for low-income families if they do need assistance. But on the side of that, the fire department is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All 3 stations. There is never a circumstance where someone can't show up at a fire station with a concern.
Oh.
So all 3 stations have an exterior buzzer. You can always buzz in, and a firefighter will come out to you and ask you what they need help with, whether it be an emergency or someone's like, you know what, I need to know about my smoke detectors. Like, I've burnt bacon the last 3 mornings and they haven't gone off. And we'll either say, hey, you know what, this is a really good question for fire prevention. They're located at 33 North Street, or here's the phone number to call them and schedule. Or sometimes, not for nothing, we do go out on these things called, investigate the alarm calls. And if someone calls with a concern about their detectors, if you don't know the number and you don't know where to go, just call 911. We will always show up. Somebody will always answer that call, and somebody will always come to your front door, no matter what. And, don't get me wrong, some firefighters may not like going on those calls. I love going on the calls because it's my job. I'm there, and
Well, you love your job.
Yeah, I swore an oath to the city that I would do it to the best of my ability. So I have no problem helping people out when they need it. And it does break my heart a little bit that some people skip that step and they'd rather just take the detector down because it was driving them sleep.
All right. So look in the camera. Do not take down your detectors.
Don't take down your smoke detectors. Check your batteries. Call 911 if you need it.
And John will come to your school.
That's right.
I'll tell your kids.
And he offers free babysitting. Right? Maybe not.
But yeah, and like I said, to revert back to what you had asked, and I don't want to say it's more common than not, but it's too common to be comfortable with. The fact that, we do see many places without smoke detectors. And just recently, in the last several weeks, we had a pretty substantial fire where people had to be rescued out of a window from ladders. And it was
scary.
And, not to give a geographical location, but it was literally 100 yards away from the Oak Hill Fire Station where I was working.
Oh, wow.
And the call came in the early hours of the morning.
Oh.
And it came in as a building fire with people trapped.
Oh, that's sad.
And
terrifying.
We showed up, and there was smoke coming from the building, and there was people trapped. There was no smoke detectors going off. The only time that the smoke detectors began going off was when one of the firefighters, they broke the door down to the apartment, and the smoke came billowing out into the hallway.
It was in the hallway.
And there was a smoke detector in the hallway.
Wow.
That was thank God, because this is it was a multi-family with over, I think it was about a dozen people living in there. And the person who was driving for me that night, I think he did a fantastic job. I can't praise the two guys I was working with enough. But outside the building, he started laying on the horn because the smoke detectors.
Oh, because so people get out.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we probably woke up people for the entire block.
Yeah.
But
That's
he
all
started
right.
just laying on the horn, thinking that maybe people will wake up and look out the window and be like, "Who is honking the horn out there?" You know, and it got them awake, and it got them to start, exiting the building and stuff. And again, it breaks my heart because it's such a simple fix.
Right.
It's so
It
easy to do, and I hope it's not because people don't want to call us. I hope that people still have the trust in us that we will help in any, fashion that we can. But then again, I'm empathetic. Maybe they need the help and they just
Right.
don't have it. And we will always come out and do what we can.
Yeah.
So besides the smoke detectors, so I'm sorry, because I have this problem. If I don't speak it when it comes in
Yeah,
my head,
sure.
I'm going to lose it. So, but you had mentioned, when he broke down that door and the smoke. So I'm thinking, all right, fire safety, the rules, when you touch a doorknob, if it's hot and, those sort of things, if there's a fire going, I don't know. I have a client that, shared a story with me about years ago, had a cordless drill that was charging in his basement.
Oh, right.
And he had some cameras there, caught the whole thing. Wow. And it basically sparked and just smoke filled up his basement. But they had the doors shut. They came home, opened the door and realized, what was happening. The smoke detectors were going off.
Yep.
But now this time, you're thinking, what made it go off? Was it dust? Is it,
Sure.
like you assume
Spider.
that it's it could be something other than that. But do you open that door? Do you, what is the protocol? I would imagine just get the hell out and just call the fire department.
911. And it's funny. So I have not a similar story to that. So a few years back, I used to love having fancy cars. So I used to have a really cool Mustang. And I don't know, let's call it 5 years ago. Lana had helped me purchase my second home maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's call it 7 years ago. So about a year or two later, I forget what I was doing. I think the battery in my Mustang had been dead.
Okay.
So I jump-started it, and I let the car run for a little bit with the garage door open, thinking that it was all fine and dandy. Turned the car off. I closed the garage door, and then I ran to the store real quick.
Oh, no.
And I came back home, and I could hear my smoke detectors going off in the house. And I'm like, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? Like, what could this be? Like, what silliness? Yeah. I just bought this house, and there's already problems. And
Lana, what did she do?
So I went into the basement because my basement and my garage are next to each other, and nothing was on fire. I went through the entire nothing on fire, and then my smoke detector, which thank God it was also a smoke CO, had told me carbon monoxide is detected, and I was like, oh my God,
Your car.
my car was running inside the garage. Before, but again, I'm human, just like everybody else is.
Yeah.
I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Right.
But my smoke detectors that were mixed use carbon monoxide as well were working.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do I do? So I should call 911, right?
Yeah.
And then 2, 3, 4 minutes later, I can hear the sirens coming down Route 68, loud and proud.
Yeah.
And then they show up, and the captain working, who's a great friend of mine to this day, he brought his little detector in, and he walked in the basement, and then he walked out and closed the door, and I was like, is it good? And he says, it is not good. He's like, we need a couple fans, we need to open up some windows, and the carbon monoxide levels were extremely high because, but again, I thought the door was closed, I thought the car was off, but mistakes happen, and I'm so glad they were working. That is the thing.
Right.
And I say this to people all the time. They say they apologize. They burnt food or amongst of things that could have happened that set them off.
Yeah.
And they say, I'm so sorry you had to come out.
Right.
I'm so sorry you had to come out for this. I said, no, I'm glad
Yeah.
And you should also be glad because this was a confirmation that your smoke and CO detectors are working.
Right. Saved you.
Whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it just woke up the entire building. Again, you can go back to bed later. You can take a nap when you get home from work, whatever the case may be. You should have some sort of comfort knowing that your detectors actually activated and they worked. And that's a huge thing for me.
This is great information.
This is great.
I thank you so much for coming. And
glad to be invited.
This is huge. You know,
what a passion you have.
Yeah.
And not even just a passion, but you care so much about your coworkers, and you make us all feel human. So we can make mistakes, but basically you're there to help, and you are a spokesperson for the whole department, knowing that you're all willing to help. So I think it's awesome.
Well, and I love the pride in your job. I think that's amazing, and I think that 17-year-old John knew that this was the path.
Yeah.
And that's, well, we should probably wrap this up. I thank you so much for coming. This really, really was helpful. And and I love your personality.
Thanks.
This was cool. Thank you. And then for those of you that are out there with questions, don't be afraid to contact your local fire prevention for questions regarding smoke detectors. Obviously, you can reach out to your fire departments. I think that was huge. And then if you're looking for Lana or I, you can find us at Coldwell Bank in Leominster. Please subscribe and share, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.